Mid-spring 1945, rumors spread among the German civilians near the Western Front. They had been told repeatedly that the British were ruthless killers, that any German they caught would be executed, left to starve, or fed to pigs. These stories, repeated endlessly through German propaganda, had created a deep-seated fear in every German woman. Yet on this cold, muddy road in April, the harsh truth of reality would confront them and shatter everything they had been taught. Anneliese, a 25-year-old former radio operator, had been walking for days with almost no food or water. Her body bore bruises and deep lacerations not from the British soldiers escorting them, but from the brutal German guards who had beaten her for attempting to flee the collapsing Third Reich. She had seen neighbors shoot their children before taking their own lives rather than surrender. And now, as she shuffled forward, her strength faltering with every step, she knew she had made a silent choice to live. No matter what awaited her at the hands of the British, the narrow path stretched before them, churned into a treacherous mix of mud and ice. Every step was a struggle, every breath sharp and shallow in the biting late European winter. The German army had long since retreated across the region, and Allied forces were advancing relentlessly. The air smelled of diesel smoke and faint remnants of explosives from villages recently bombed. Broken trees, scarred and bare, marked the landscape, while craters filled with freezing water dotted the fields like sinister mirrors of the chaos that had come before. 15 women, former clerks and office assistants for the German military, moved along in a ragged line. Their dresses were patched, stained with dried blood and clinging mud. Some walked barefoot, their feet wrapped in tattered cloth. Others wore heavy boots that cut into swollen ankles. Their hair, once neatly tied, hung in tangles around dirt-smeared faces. Cuts and bruises streaked pale skin. Their eyes were downcast, their bodies stiff, their movements laborious. At the front, 2 British soldiers marched alongside them, rifles loosely held, eyes watchful, faces smeared with dirt and fatigue. They were in their mid-20s, exhausted yet alert, tasked with escorting these captured women to a safe holding area. Behind the group, 2 more soldiers maintained a vigilant watch. The terrain bore the unmistakable scars of battle-destroyed German tanks, bomb craters, shattered buildings. In the distance, the grinding of trucks and roar of engines signaled the relentless advance of the British Army, already repairing roads and organizing temporary supply lines. The cold pressed down on the women, chilling their thin clothing and heavy boots, dragging their tired limbs with every step. The air carried the acrid tang of gunpowder and smoke, punctuated by distant, metallic odors that suggested the bodies of the fallen were still buried beneath the snow. Sounds overlapped in a disorienting, frightening symphony. The low rumble of tanks, the occasional crack of gunfire as patrols cleared abandoned houses, and the strange, mournful calls of birds surviving amidst the devastation. Anneliese trudged near the front of the line, supporting herself with short, hesitant steps. Her legs were weak, her body battered from days without sustenance. Suddenly, a sharp, searing pain shot through her lower back, radiating down to her hips. Every step made the pain worse, and she bit her lip until it bled, trying to stifle a cry. She could not show weakness, not here, not before those she had been taught to fear. But the pain escalated rapidly. One moment, she was standing, stumbling forward. The next, her legs gave out entirely. They felt disconnected from her body, useless, and she collapsed onto the frozen, muddy ground. The impact sent a jolt through her arms as she braced herself, but a choked cry escaped. The women behind her froze. For a heartbeat, silence descended over the mud-slicked path. Ingrid, walking just behind Anneliese, dropped to her knees beside her friend. "Anneliese, can you move? Are you hurt badly?" she asked, voice trembling with fear. Anneliese shook her head weakly, tears streaming down her face. I can't feel my legs," she whispered. "It hurts too much." The British soldiers stopped immediately. One, sporting a dark mustache, spoke urgently into a radio, his voice carrying authority but tinged with concern rather than anger. The other soldiers glanced at each other, confused but ready to respond. Meanwhile, the women formed a protective circle around Anneliese, instinctively shielding her from the feared enemy. They remembered every story their government had drilled into them, tales of merciless killers who would shoot anyone too weak to march. Now, the truth of their choice to survive hung precariously in the balance. Moments later, a military jeep approached, the Red Cross clearly painted on its side. The engine's roar sliced through the cold air. Two medics jumped out, their uniforms distinct from the soldiers. One was tall and serious, moving with brisk efficiency. The other larger, older, wearing thick spectacles that gleamed in the weak sunlight. They approached cautiously, hands raised in clear gestures of peace. The young medic knelt beside Annalise, setting down a medical bag brimming with bandages, bottles, and tools. His eyes, serious yet gentle, met hers. Though she could not understand his words, the tone spoke volumes. "I am here to help." Slowly, he examined her pulse and checked her eyes, asking questions she couldn't comprehend, but she understood the concern in his gaze. Her friends watched, uncertain. This was not what they had been told. These were the devils who would show no mercy. And yet, here they were, offering care, not cruelty. The medic's partner arrived with a stretcher from a second vehicle, a small ambulance. Together, the medics carefully rolled Annalise onto a backboard, ensuring her spine remained perfectly straight. Every motion was deliberate, precise, and slow, designed to prevent further injury. Annalise cried out softly with the slightest movement, but the medics paused patiently until the pain subsided, speaking to her in calm tones. Once secured, she was lifted gently into the ambulance. The young medic climbed in beside her, monitoring her condition, his expression unwavering in its attention. Then he gestured to the women waiting in the mud. "Follow." The soldiers signaled, and one by one, the remaining 14 women climbed into a nearby army truck, their faces reflecting disbelief, fear, and tentative hope. As the convoy moved through the scarred countryside, Annelise's friends clung to each other, eyes wide. They passed through ruins that would have seemed familiar under different circumstances, now strangely distant as British supply trucks and engineering crews moved along rebuilt paths. The women held onto the canvas sides of the truck, watching the ambulance ahead, trying to make sense of the mercy they had never expected. Inside the compound, the women were led to a small tent. It was cooler here, a stark relief after days in the freezing mud. A British nurse approached, her uniform white with faint blood stains, her face tired but kind. She offered water in metal bottles and simple gestures indicating they could drink and rest. Then she presented food, canned meat, crackers, chocolate bars, and fruit, each item a miracle after the starvation they had endured. The women ate slowly, overwhelmed by a mix of hunger and disbelief. Tears streaked dirty cheeks, yet the nurse's calm presence provided reassurance. Here, they were treated as human beings, not enemies. And somewhere, deep in the tent, a faint flicker of understanding began to form. Perhaps everything they had been told about the British was false. Hours passed. The convoy, the medics, and the tents of care stood in sharp contrast to the horror and fear of the past days. Annalise lay in the ambulance, her heart slowing as morphine dulled the agonizing pain. For the first time in days, she felt a strange sense of safety, a feeling she had never imagined possible from the very people her nation had painted as monsters. "Anna, what's happening? Can you move?" Greta knelt beside her friend, panic etched across her pale, mud-streaked face. Anna tried to push herself upright, but her legs refused to obey. They felt alien, as if they belonged to someone else. She looked down, seeing them sprawled uselessly in the muck, numb and lifeless. Only a burning agony shot through her lower back, making every heartbeat a torment. I can't move them," Anna gasped. Tears streaked the grime on her cheeks, and her voice trembled. "My legs. I can't feel them at all." The British soldiers halted immediately. One, a stern young man with a dark mustache, barked into his radio. His words, though sharp, carried more concern than anger. The other soldier glanced between his comrades and the women, uncertainty flickering across his face. The other women instinctively closed around Anna, forming a protective circle. Every horror story they had been told about the British came flooding back. They were ruthless. They shot the weak. They left prisoners to die in the mud. And now, their friend lay helpless at their feet. What would happen next? Margaretti, an older woman who had once worked in an administrative office, stepped forward cautiously. She raised her hands in a pleading gesture. "Please. Wait, please. Help," she implored, pointing urgently at Anna, then gesturing as if showing the inability to walk. The mustached soldier glanced at his partner and back to the women, then into his radio. His voice was rapid, firm, but not angry. The soldier's eyes never left Anna, gauging her suffering and the worried expressions of her companions. Minutes crawled by as the women murmured among themselves in German. "What will they do? Will they kill her?" one whispered. "Or leave her to die?" Another voice, hollow with fear, speculated. "Maybe they'll just walk away." They all remembered the propaganda. Better to die fighting or to take your own life, than to fall into British hands. And yet here they were, having chosen to live. But at what cost? Then, the unmistakable roar of an approaching engine cut through the tense silence. A small military jeep, marked with the Red Cross, skidded to a halt 20 feet away, flinging mud into the frozen road. Two men in distinct uniforms leapt from it, moving with a precision and urgency that silenced the women's whispers. These were no combat soldiers, they were medics, bearing the symbol of mercy. One was slender, perhaps 30, with a serious expression and quick, purposeful movements. The other was larger, older, his thick glasses catching the light as he followed closely. They advanced with a fluid efficiency, their medical kits swinging in rhythm with their steps. The German women instinctively stepped back, but kept their circle intact around Anna. Hesitant yet curious, the younger medic raised both hands in a calming gesture. His voice, gentle and deliberate, spoke in English. Though incomprehensible to Anna and the others, the tone conveyed reassurance rather than threat. He gestured first at Anna, then at his medical bag, mimicking the motions of a careful examination. Greta, who had some basic first aid knowledge, immediately recognized his intent. He wanted to help. The women exchanged uncertain glances, silently weighing their options. Slowly, they stepped aside. The medic knelt beside Anna, carefully setting down his bag and opening it. Neatly ranged bandages, medicine bottles, and tools lay inside. His eyes softened as he met Anna's tearful gaze. He spoke quietly again, the meaning clear without translation. "I am here to help." Then came a small gesture that stunned everyone present. The medic gave a kind, sympathetic nod, a human acknowledgement of pain, free of mockery or malice. Anna stared at him, confused and frightened. This was not the monster she had imagined. It was a man who seemed to care. His hands moved with practiced precision as he began the examination. He checked her pulse at the wrist, then her neck, and used a small flashlight to inspect her eyes. Though Anna couldn't understand his questions, she could feel his concern, the subtle reassurance in his tone. "My back," she whispered in German, pointing to the searing pain. "My legs, I can't feel them." The medic's expression hardened with concern. He spoke rapidly to his partner in precise medical English, then began a careful inspection of Anna's spine and legs. Each touch was gentle, cautious, so light that even the slightest pressure caused Anna to cry out. The medics paused immediately whenever her pain flared, adjusting their approach with meticulous care. The scene was surreal for the women. For weeks, they had been told that the British were killers, that wounded prisoners were left to perish. Now, they watched men trained to heal, not harm, move slowly and deliberately around their friend. Every gesture of care challenged the lies they had been raised to believe. The older medic, a solid man with graying hair and sharp eyes behind thick spectacles, joined the younger one at Anna's side. They exchanged rapid, urgent words in a language full of medical jargon that meant nothing to the watching women. But the intensity on their faces spoke volumes. It was serious, perhaps a severe spinal injury. The younger medic glanced at the women, then at the two British soldiers standing nearby, his expression commanding, but not hostile. Orders flew from his lips into the radio, clipped and precise. The soldier with the mustache nodded sharply and relayed the instructions. Then the medic returned his attention to Anna. He opened his bag and carefully drew out a small glass vial and a fine needle. The women collectively held their breath. What was that? Poison? Something to end her life quickly? But Margaretti, who had some basic knowledge of medicine, immediately recognized it. Morphine. Strong pain relief. The medic showed the needle to Anna, then gently pointed to her arm. He made gestures, an injection, a promise of rest, an assurance that the pain could be eased. Anna glanced at Greta, who was holding her head. Greta gave a trembling nod, her own tears mingling with the mud on her face. Anna had no choice. Slowly, she extended her arm. Within minutes of the injection, her grimace softened. The merciless, burning pain that had dominated her body for hours began to dull, replaced by a slow, soothing numbness. Her breathing evened out. For the first time since the collapse of the German defenses, she wasn't crying. The young medic stayed close, eyes scanning her constantly. He monitored her pulse, checked her eyes, and murmured words Anna didn't understand, but the tone, calm and tender, spoke louder than translation. It said, "You are not alone. You are safe now. We will care for you." Another vehicle appeared, a larger truck, its canvas cover marked with the unmistakable Red Cross. The back doors swung open, and two more medics emerged, carrying a sturdy stretcher. The German women froze. Their minds had been fed a constant stream of stories portraying British soldiers as merciless. Yet here were men moving with careful precision, not violence. The medics didn't roughly hoist Anna onto the stretcher. Instead, they worked in seamless coordination. The older man instructed, pointing to Anna's back, stressing complete alignment. The stretcher was laid gently beside her in the mud. Then, with slow, deliberate care, they rolled Anna onto her side, ensuring her head and neck remained aligned. A special rigid board was slid beneath her to keep her perfectly still, and only then did they carefully shift her onto the stretcher. Every motion was deliberate. When Anna cried out, even slightly, they paused, waiting until she could breathe again, before continuing. The women who had been forced to see cruelty everywhere were speechless. These were the same British soldiers who were supposed to be monsters, yet here they were, handling Anna with a gentleness more tender than anything the women had experienced in months. Once secured, the medics lifted Anna with synchronized strength and precision, placing her onto the ambulance's internal rack with care that bordered on reverence. The young medic stayed at her side, watching every twitch of pain, adjusting her position when necessary. Before the ambulance doors closed, he looked back at the group of women. He pointed at them, then at himself, and made a gesture signaling them to follow. They could stay with their friend. The mustached soldier confirmed this with a quick nod, and waved them toward a waiting army truck. Hesitation filled the women. Could it really be true? Would they be allowed to accompany Anna? Or was this some cruel trick? Margaretti was the first to move, climbing into the truck bed. One by one, the others followed, gripping the wooden benches and the canvas sides. As the convoy set off, ambulance first, then the truck with the women, followed by a small escort jeep. They rode in stunned silence. Through the open back of the truck, they could see the ambulance ahead, the bright Red Cross standing out against the desolate landscape. Greta wiped tears from her dirt-streaked cheeks. "They are helping her," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The British, they are saving her." Marianne, who had been silent the entire ordeal, finally spoke, her voice uncertain. "But they told us, they said the British would kill anyone they caught. They said they were monsters." No one had an answer. They simply held onto the truck sides as the rough road bounced them up and down, their eyes locked on the ambulance. With every jolt, every turn, every passing tree and cratered field, the women felt a strange, disorienting sense. Everything they had been told was wrong. For 30 long minutes, the convoy moved through the devastated countryside. Mud and snow clung to their boots, and the air smelled sharp and bitter. But inside that moving group, something fragile yet undeniable had shifted. Trust had begun to grow, fragile and hesitant, but present. They had chosen life, and now, against all expectations, life had not been denied to them. The convoy rolled out of the devastated battlefields and into a zone that hummed with order and life. Here, the British had already built a bustling base. The women pressed against the sides of the truck, staring at a world that seemed almost unreal. The rough, cratered road gave way to smooth asphalt. freshly laid by engineers who had worked feverishly to stabilize the area. Metal buildings, bright and imposing in the sun, rose like fortresses along the road. Crates, barrels, and stacks of supplies towered higher than the women's heads, all marked with words in English they could not read. Trucks and jeeps moved constantly, carrying ammunition, food, and soldiers, their engines roaring in a steady rhythm. The scale of the British operation was staggering. Everything had been prepared, organized, and ready. The convoy turned into a large fenced compound. A sign at the gate bore English letters the women could not understand. Soldiers waved them through without question. Inside, the scene was chaotic but controlled. Wounded men were carried on stretchers from ambulances into large tents. Nurses and doctors rushed between them, issuing orders with sharp precision. The Union Jack fluttered high above the tents, a calm emblem amidst the frenzy. The ambulance carrying Anna, her back carefully immobilized on the stretcher, stopped at a wide tent, marked with a red cross. Medics jumped out, moving with efficient purpose, while the truck with the other women pulled alongside. A soldier told them to climb down. Huddled together, the women obeyed, their boots sinking into the softened earth as they stepped down cautiously. A young nurse approached them, her blonde hair tucked neatly under a cap. She was likely in her late 20s, and though the white uniform she wore was streaked with faint blood, her presence radiated calm. Fatigue etched her face, but her eyes held a quiet kindness. She spoke in English first, then, realizing the women did not understand, switched to gestures, pointing at the group. Then at a small tent nearby, she beckoned them to follow and sit. Ilse nodded, understanding the direction, and led the women inside. The tent was simple but clean, with wooden benches and a few narrow beds. Shade from the canvas offered immediate relief from the chill outside. The nurse returned with water, presenting metal bottles filled with clear liquid. The women drank cautiously at first, unsure if this relief was real. The cold water, pure and refreshing, was more than any of them had tasted in weeks. Next came food. The nurse opened a box, revealing canned meat, biscuits, chocolate, and preserved fruit. She placed everything on a low wooden crate and gestured for them to eat. The women stared, almost frozen, at the abundance before them. During the final months of the war, rations had been minimal. Hunger had been a constant companion. Lau was the first to move, reaching for a biscuit and biting into it slowly, eyes wide. Real food, actual food. Others followed cautiously, savoring each bite, as though afraid it might vanish. Some cried silently, overwhelmed by the sensation of fullness and taste. After weeks of near-starvation, the nurse observed them, a soft, almost sorrowful smile on her face. Words fell from her lips in English, but they did not matter. The expression on her face conveyed everything. I am sorry you suffered. I am sorry you went hungry. Without lingering, she returned to her duties, tending to the wounded soldiers. The women sat in stunned silence, listening to the bustle outside. Through the open tent flaps, they could see the ambulance where Anna had been taken. Medics hurried her stretcher into a larger tent. Voices were urgent, clipped with command. Might she make it? Whispered Marianne, voice trembling. No one had an answer. Yet for the first time, hope flickered. Hours passed slowly, punctuated by the relentless activity of the field hospital. More ambulances arrived, doors slamming, stretchers clattering. Doctors shouted for instruments, nurses darted between tents, and the groans of injured men filled the air. Later, another nurse approached the women. She was older, with streaks of gray in her hair and a no-nonsense expression softened by kindness. She brought a tray of hot food, bread so soft it seemed unreal, steaming bowls of chicken broth with vegetables that filled the tent with a comforting aroma. The women tasted it slowly. Tears streaked down their dirt-stained faces once more. Warmth, nourishment, and safety had rarely felt so overwhelming. The older nurse lingered for a moment, her English measured but gentle. She gestured to each woman, then made a sign as though asking them to write their names. Elsa stepped forward, speaking clearly. Elsa. The nurse repeated it with care, then pointed to herself. Sister Howard. One by one, she went around the tent, learning names, acknowledging their humanity, treating them not as captives but as people. When her brief rounds were done, She began to leave. Elle, trembling, reached out and gently grasped her sleeve, eyes wide. Is our friend Anna? One of the women whispered, pointing toward the medical tent. Sister Howard's expression turned serious. She gestured deliberately, showing a figure lying down, then pointed at the large tent before cutting the air with her hands in a slicing motion. Surgery. Anna was undergoing surgery. She held up 10 fingers, then made a waiting motion, indicating she would check on Anna and return with news. An hour later, true to her word, Sister Howard returned. Her face was weary but calm. She sat with the women and began to communicate through gestures and simple signs. She traced an imaginary line along her own spine, showing the injury, then demonstrated a pressing motion with her hands, conveying the complexity of the surgery required to repair Anna's damage. Slowly, she shifted her expression to one of hope and gave a thumbs up. The operation had succeeded. Relief flooded the women. Elle's tears fell freely, and others embraced each other silently. Anna had survived. 3 days later, the women were moved to a different part of the compound, a section reserved for civilian prisoners. Everything was organized and clean. They slept on real mattresses, tucked in with fresh blankets. Meals arrived reliably, 3 times a day. Food was abundant, nourishing, and consistent. They received clean cotton dresses, undergarments, and sandals that fit. They were allowed to shower with hot water and real soap, the scent unfamiliar but comforting. Some women lingered under the warm water, washing away weeks of grime, blood, and fear. On the 4th day, Sister Howard returned with good news. Anna was allowed visitors. Elle and Elsa followed the nurse to the recovery tent. The room was quieter, the bustle of the field hospital muted here. Anna lay in a proper bed with crisp, white sheets. She was awake, pale and fragile, but her eyes lit up when she saw her friends. "You came," she whispered in German, voice trembling. "You're really here." Elle knelt beside her, taking Anna's hand gently. "We're here. We're safe now. How do you feel?" "Tired," Anna admitted. Her eyes swept over the white sheets and sterile surroundings, still processing. "They fixed my back. The British doctors, they did surgery on my spine." She looked down at her legs beneath the blanket, wiggling her toes. "I can feel them. I can move again." Tears filled Elsa's eyes. "That's incredible. A miracle." Anna glanced around at the other patients in nearby beds, all British soldiers wounded in battle. "They are treating me the same as them," she murmured. "The same care, the same medicine. I don't understand. We're the enemy. We're German. Why save me?" Her question hung in the air. The same question all 15 women carried silently in their hearts. Why this compassion? Why this mercy? All their lives, they had been told the British were ruthless, that German lives were worthless to them. Every moment of care they had witnessed contradicted the stories they had been fed. Maybe it's all a lie," Elsa said softly, the words tentative but heavy with possibility. Weeks turned into months. The women remained in the hospital compound, given small duties, helping in the kitchen, folding clothes, organizing supplies. The work was simple, almost mundane, but the real transformation was internal. They were learning, slowly, to trust. About a month after their capture, the women gathered in their tent for a serious conversation. The first time they openly acknowledged the truth they had been avoiding. 2 months in, the arrival of new British soldiers, men badly wounded in fighting, made the lesson undeniable. Acts of kindness were consistent, not random. By early June, Anna could walk again, carefully, using a cane. Her progress amazed the British doctors. She had regained strength they had feared lost forever. Her recovery was a testament to their skill and their care. July brought mixed emotions, relief and fear. Plans were being made to send the women home. With Germany's surrender in May 1945, arrangements were underway to return civilian prisoners via neutral channels. The journey was long, complicated, and uncertain. Eventually, they boarded a neutral ship bound for Bremenhaven. The road where Anna had collapsed, muddy and frozen, now lived in memory as a place of revelation. It had been the stage for a lesson far deeper than mere survival. There, 15 German women learned that their enemy could show more humanity than their own leaders. The pain, the delicate surgery, the hot meals, The clean beds, all of it was evidence of a different power, the power of mercy, kindness, and human decency, even amid destruction. These women carried that lesson forward, long after the war ended, through the turmoil of post-war Germany, its occupation, and its slow rebuilding. As Anna wrote in her diary, which she kept for life, they saved my back, but more importantly, they broke the lies that had imprisoned my heart. Decades later, Anna would tell her grandchildren about that day on the frozen road, about falling, about the British medics rushing toward her. She would always emphasize the same lesson: hate is taught, kindness is a choice, and sometimes, the most powerful weapon isn't a gun or a bomb, it's human goodness. This story, like so many from that war, reminds us that even in the darkest moments, people can choose compassion over cruelty, truth over lies, and life over fear. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories from World War II. Click the notification bell so you never miss a video that will change the way you see history. Share this with someone who believes in the power of kindness. It's a lesson the world needs to hear.